What's going on, folks? Welcome to another episode of Ask RGT 85, where I answer your questions. This week's question comes to us from Jason Schneider over on the Facebook fan page. And Jason wants tragedy. Jason wants some sadness on this channel and heartbreak. Jason asked me, what was my most tragic gaming story? It could be I lost a game in a flood, a fire, something, etc. And the second I saw that question, I knew I wanted to answer it because it's a very, very easy question for me. As they say, hindsight is 20/20. And hindsight's kicking my ass on this story. So Jason, I've got a great answer for you. What is my most tragic gaming story? Let's find out. So when I was a freshman in high school in 1999, I had a pretty robust Sega Saturn collection. I had 30 plus games, I had accessories, of course the system, and nobody really cared about the Saturn in 99. You know, the Saturn was essentially a failed console. People didn't care about it. Games were super cheap, and you know, it was the Saturn. Who cares? You know, there was other stuff out there. The Dreamcast had just come out. The PS2 was on the horizon. That is what people cared about. Nobody cared about the Saturn. And I like the Saturn. You know, the Saturn is a cool system. It's still a very cool system today. It's definitely one of my favorite systems still to this day. And I was new in town. I was a new kid around town. I remember this dude came over that I met at school, and he saw all my Saturn stuff, and he was like, oh, this is pretty cool. And we played a bunch of games and stuff. He had never really played a Saturn because the Saturn failed in North America. Not a lot of people had the Sega Saturn. And I remember he asked me if he could borrow my Saturn and my games and stuff like that. And I was like, yeah, sure. You know, I have a bunch of other games. I don't really care. You know, I'm talking, I had House of the Dead on the Saturn, complete in box, Shining Force 3, you know, lots of top titles for the Sega Saturn, Sonic Jam, you know, and I just didn't care. Like, you know, it was the Saturn. Who cares? These games are worth nothing. And, you know, who cared about game values back when you were a kid? That wasn't really a thing. Game values didn't really become popular until, you know, later. And so I let him borrow it, and, you know, I remember going over to his house and playing it some, and I was like, hey, you know, when can I get this back? And he was like, oh, you know, I'll give it back to you in a couple days or whatever. And I honestly, I don't know if I forgot about it or I just didn't care. And I just let him keep all of that Saturn stuff. I let him keep everything. And I just didn't care. You know, it didn't matter to me at that time. I was playing video games, but I wasn't a collector. I was, you know, just a fan of games. And so, you know, he was a cool dude. I think he let me get some, you know, N64 games, you know, in exchange. So I just let him keep it. I let him keep all of that. And thinking back on it, I sincerely regret it. I regret it still till this day because, you know, a game like House of the Dead is $150. Shining Force is, you know, $200-300. And I just didn't care. I didn't care what these games were. I didn't care about playing them because you just always think of newer stuff when you're younger. You always think of the future. And it's funny because I've lost contact with this dude, but I remember probably like 5 or 6 years ago, I saw him out at a bar, and I was like, hey man, you still got that Saturn stuff I let you borrow? And he was like, what are you talking about? And I was like, dude, when we were freshmen in high school, I let you borrow a Sega Saturn and a bunch of games and, you know, a light gun and all sorts of stuff. Do you still have that stuff? Is it still at your parents' house? If it is, you know, I want it back. I'll give you some N64 games. I don't care, whatever. You know, I want that stuff back. And he was like, oh no, you know, we threw that away when I went to college and blah, blah, blah. And I was just like, no, no, come on, man. You still gotta have it. It's gotta be there somewhere. Can we go look? Can we go look at your parents' house to make sure? And he was like, nah, dude, I'm pretty sure I threw that stuff away. You didn't seem to care about it, and I didn't want it anymore. And I was just like, oh my God. And that's by far the most depressing and my biggest gaming regret, and, you know, just the most depressing thing in the world, because I would have such a much larger Saturn collection right now than I do, because, you know, 30 Saturn games, even if they're common crappy games, like, that's still a lot of value, and there was still a lot of fun games in there. Crusader No Remorse, Knight's Christmas Edition, just all sorts of stuff. I can't even remember all the games I had on that system that I let him borrow, and it's a shame because I would love to have them back. And, you know, Brian, if you're watching this and you come across those games, you come across that system at your parents' house or something, or you just feel bad for throwing away my stuff because it was my stuff. Yes, I didn't care, 16, 17 years ago, but now I care. If you want to pay me back, just give me a couple $100. We'll call it even, and and it's all good. But I'm kind of pissed off about that. I want my Saturn stuff back, man. Give me my Saturn stuff. But yeah, that's my biggest gaming tragedy. My biggest gaming, negative story is definitely giving away all my Saturn stuff for a couple, shitty N64 games. I think I got like Glover and stuff like that. Stuff, at the time was fun, but who cares? So thank you, Jason, for sending in this question. As always, if you want to submit a question to me on Ask RGT85, make sure you like the Facebook fan page. About once a week, I ask a question on there and tell you guys to ask me questions. Thank you for watching this video. Let me know your biggest gaming tragedy story in the comments section down below. Let's get negative. Let's get out the bleach and the razors and just be depressed, because that's what this is about being depressed. Thank you for watching this video. If you're new here, subscribe to the channel. Make sure you check out other videos on the channel. And if you really like my face, check out my Patreon page. I'll catch you guys next time. I'm going to cry about that lost Saturn collection some more. Later.